Hey, Peter.
Hey, Adam.
Hey, I know you haven't traveled in a bit, but how's your French?
Je parle le français très bien, monsieur.
How's your French locked hand voicings?
Ooh, now that's a little different.
I think it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm Adam Banis.
And I'm Peter Martin.
And you're listening to the You'll Hear podcast.
Music advice coming at you.
Coming at you today, sponsored by Open Studio. Oh, wait. No, you have an Open Studio shirt on. I do not. Go to openstudiojazz.com to check out all the fun jazz courses.
That's back. And that's a thing again.
That is definitely a thing. Including the Piano Access Pass, where you can get access to every piano course we've ever made and will ever make as long as you're a Piano Access Pass member. Go to openstudiojazz.com/piano access pass.
Also, we're sponsored by Human Beings.
Oh, the best.
Big shout out to Humans.
Oh, they're the best and the worst.
Yeah, both simultaneously wonderful and killing the planet.
They're the most beautiful, ugliest,
ugly beauty, in the words of Thelonious Monk.
Well, speaking of humans, we're gonna talk about today some locked hand voicings that they won't tell you about.
The humans.
Are you curious at all what I mean by that?
Yes, I'm very. I want to know why no one's ever told me about this.
You were like, "What are we talking about today?" And I was like, "We're talking about voicings that they won't tell you about." And you were like, "What do you mean?" You didn't. None of that happened. You were just like, "Oh yeah, cool."
You know, the locked hands always scares me. That term, but for two reasons.
Okay,
can I tell you?
Yeah, go ahead.
One, don't know what it means. That's the biggest thing. Because you know what? We're scared of what we don't know.
Yeah, I don't really know either. That's just what I call it.
And then it sounds like locked hands, like you're locked up.
Like you're about to be cuffed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like you're like, which is maybe what it is. Maybe.
Well, what this won't do is cuff your voicing possibilities.
Ooh, hello.
Like
no script.
No, so why I wanted to call this locked hand voicings that they won't tell you about is there's a lot of voicings about locked hands, specifically one kind, right? Barry Harris's sixth diminished, right? Where we go between the major and the diminished. And that is a super cool, beautiful way to play some locked hand voicings. You know about that, right?
Yeah.
But there's another way that you hear a lot of...
Of course.
He said, yeah.
Barry Harris.
He's going to Google Barry Harris. That's
Barry Harris.
Sad.
No,
but there's another way that I have heard and transcribed a lot of other pianists use. A lot of pianists use kind of a mixture between that and then another way to do it. I was just working on this solo, this Oscar Peterson solo. I've talked about it before around here, I think, on Bags Groove from his Night Train record. At our Monday transcribing club at openstudiojazz.com, we transcribe the solo. There's a big locked hands section of this solo, and he does this thing that I wanted to highlight, and it's what I call the French style.
Ooh.
French.
Ooh la la.
The French style. And it doesn't involve using the Barry Harris method where you go between a major six chord, like C major six,
right,
and then a diminished, and a C major six, and a diminished. It's a little bit simpler than that, actually. It's a little bit more basic, and it's a little bit more ambiguous because of the simplicity of it.
Yeah. And
it goes like this. Instead of going between a major chord and a diminished chord, we use our octaves, right? Locked hands is an octaves device.
Now, is that like kind of a rule with locked hands? You're within an octave, your outside is an octave.
Yeah, the outside notes are in octaves. I think that's how I generally distinguish that between drop two, which is like a tenth, right? The outside notes are a tenth on drop two.
Okay.
With the locked hands, or the shearing style voicings is sometimes called, it's a octaves device.
Yeah.
Right? It's meant to have these outside notes be octaves. And we can play melodically then. We can play melodies, and we can do things like that. So the Barry Harris style, again, is we have our C major six chord, right? C from the top down. C, A, G, and E in the right hand. Yeah. C in the left hand. And then you go, you do that, and then you do D diminished. And then you do E with, the C major six with an E, and then F diminished.
Yeah.
And then you just go up.
Kind of perfect voice leading, as it were.
Perfect voice leading, as it were. It's a cool sound, but it's a little bit restrictive, I think. There's another style that you hear played by people like Oscar Peterson. Bill Evans plays this as well. Hank Jones. And it's a little bit freer. They use the six diminished stuff too, for sure. That's what I'm saying. It's like a mixed bag. But it kind of, to me, it leans more on composers like Ravel, Debussy, Poulenc, Franck. And that's if we have our C major six chord here, we have the best way to figure this out is to just play this in inversions, right? So we just go up the C major 6, right? Go all the way up from C to C and back down. Exactly.
Yep.
Now, if we want to add a scale to this, instead of doing a diminished chord, we simply move these outside notes up. Right? We move the C up to D, and we keep the chord the same.
Oh.
It's not diatonic, but that major 6 part kind of stays the same. And then the next note up would be E, and so we change inversions.
So that's the first inversion of the original chord.
Exactly. And then we move those outside notes. So from E, C, A, G, E, we move it to F, A, right.
Yeah.
And then we're at the next inversion.
Ah.
So then the next one is just a new inversion,
Okay.
right, from G to A. And then we move it up again. Nope, so... Yeah, like a C triad in the middle there. And then we're back at C. So what this gives us is a much
Very
more sort of-
French.
it's very French.
It's like you're at the Musée d'Orsay.
And you can use this with different modes, right? So if we want a D minor, right, we're going to borrow from that F major. How French is that? If it's a G7, you know,
flat 9.
and this is actually what I saw Oscar do in Bach's Groove. It's a G blues. He really leaned on what I would consider to be like a D minor 6 sound, moving those outside notes around like that. What this does is it gives us this great inside. It varies from the strictly going between the diminished and not. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
It brings this tension. It sounds very Ravel, very Debussy-ish. So let's break down real quick a 251 because there's one secret one. Before you do though, why don't you hit a like and subscribe?
You know what I'm saying? It's free.
Yeah.
It helps us. It helps you.
Oh, it helps everything.
It helps the world.
It helps
The
all of us.
algorithms. It resets the Google algorithms in our favor. Our being humans.
Yes. So there's one more bonus that I want to put on this.
Okay.
And that's what do you do when you have like an altered diminished chord, right? Or sorry, an altered dominant chord, like a G7 flat 9, right? You can do the same thing. You can, let's say we have our G7 flat 9. We can start on that, let's say we start on that F diminished, right? Which is a common way to think about G7 flat 9. We can just move this outside note up the diminished scale.
Right.
Then the next inversion.
Likey.
And do the same thing. And the next inversion. And do the same thing. Move that outside note.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the next inversion. And we're back to D. And then the same thing. Nope. From D, move that outside note up a whole step. That's all we're doing is we're going to those like F diminished chords and moving the outside note up a whole step.
Yep. Good
So
stuff.
then you get this thing.
Nice.
Vive la France.
Vive la France.
So for a 251, we can lean on like the F, right? The F major 6. That's our D minor, right? Where we're borrowing from the relative major. And then we can come down that G with that diminished sound, right? And then land on a C.
Nice.
And then maybe you want to throw in the Barry Harris thing just for...
Yeah, because these work together,
They
right?
work together. You hear players use these all the time.
Yeah.
So that's the secret locked hands that they're not going to tell you about. The French will tell you. The French will tell you all
Friends will
about
tell you. They're proud people.
They're more than happy to tell you about it, but no one else
right.
is going to talk about it. No, I really think that this style doesn't get talked a lot about, but it's there. Everybody's playing like that.
Right,
I've heard
right.
you do this.
I've thrown it a little bit, and I mean, it's still like, you know, the way that you showed it, it's not super intuitive. I mean, there's a logic behind it that I get, but in terms of just my hands going to it, I'm sure I do some of these.
You do.
You know, like, and now that I'm thinking, I've never thought about it as just the outside moving.
Yeah.
I think also combining it with a little chromaticism to, you know, as we do, turning around a little bit, maybe.
Totally. Woo, yeah. The cool way to practice these is to start with just exactly kind of what you were referring to is you can start with arpeggios, right? And then just think about that outside note moving to fill in the gaps, like still strike, gets tricky going down because you got to anticipate what the chord is gonna be.
Yeah.
So there it is.
Good stuff. Well, like and subscribe, as we said, and we want to thank our sponsor, Open Studio Jazz, as we always do. And until tomorrow, you'll hear it.